No one noticed the eagle at first. It circled high above the cemetery, silent, unmoving, its shadow gliding over rows of dark umbrellas and bowed heads. To everyone below, it was just another bird riding the afternoon air. A coincidence. Nature doing what nature does, but this eagle wasn't hunting. It was watching. Below, a coffin was being lowered into the ground. A man's name was spoken softly, followed by phrases that felt incomplete, hurried, unfinished. People cried, but not the way you cry when everything has been said. This was the kind of grief filled with gaps, with sentences that never reached the ear they were meant for. The eagle descended slightly, wings adjusting against the wind, eyes fixed on a single figure near the grave, a woman standing rigid, her hands clenched, her face dry but strained. She had rehearsed what she wanted to say to him for years, and now there was no one left to hear it. Inside the eagle, something tightened, because the man in the coffin had not left this world willingly. He hadn't planned his exit. He hadn't said goodbye. His death came abruptly, leaving behind words trapped in his chest, apologies, gratitude, confessions that never made it past his lips. And now, somehow, impossibly, he was here, not as a ghost drifting between worlds, not as a memory living only in others' minds, but as a living creature, carried by bone and feather, bound to the sky. He didn't understand how it had happened, only that when he opened his eyes again, the world felt sharper, louder, more distant, and yet unbearably close to the people he loved. As the priest finished speaking, the eagle let out a single cry, not loud, not dramatic, just enough to make several mourners look up at the same time. For a brief moment, something passed between the sky and the ground, and one woman felt it in her chest, the unmistakable sensation of being seen. This is not a story about death. It's a story about what happens when someone leaves too much unfinished and is given one impossible chance to stay close. Before we continue, understand this. Stories like this are not about animals behaving strangely. They are about people who refuse to disappear quietly. If you're new here, this channel explores moments where life does not end cleanly, where something remains unfinished, unresolved, and somehow finds a way to stay. Not as a miracle meant to impress, but as a presence meant to observe, to wait, or to protect. If this kind of story resonates with you, take a moment to subscribe. These narratives are built slowly, carefully, and they only make sense when followed all the way through. And while you're here, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Different places carry different beliefs about what happens after death, and that matters more than you might think. The man at the center of this story never believed he would leave without saying goodbye. He assumed time would stretch, that there would always be another conversation, another visit, another chance to explain himself properly. But life rarely waits for closure. When he died, his absence felt abrupt, not dramatic, just wrong, like a sentence cut off mid-word. And yet, something about him didn't fade. What returned was not his body, not his voice, not even his face. What returned was his awareness, sharpened, detached, and bound to a creature built for distance and perspective. An eagle does not move through the world the way humans do. It watches from above. It observes patterns rather than moments. It sees who lingers behind, who avoids eye contact, who carries regret instead of grief. And that vantage point changes everything. As the days following the funeral unfold, the eagle begins to understand why he was allowed to remain, not to interfere, not to fix what cannot be repaired, but to witness truths that only reveal themselves when a life ends too suddenly. Some signs are subtle, others are impossible to ignore, and one of them will force someone he loved to question whether goodbye is always spoken with words, or if sometimes it arrives on wings when no one is looking. What follows is not comfort, it is recognition, and it will change how more than one person remembers him. The first thing he understood as an eagle was distance, not emotional distance, physical distance. The world looked arranged, like someone had taken a ruler to it. Roads were thin grey veins, houses sat in neat clusters. People moved like small, urgent thoughts. Even grief looked different from above, a slow gathering, a dark knot tightening around one spot in a cemetery. He circled once, twice, and felt the wind carry him without effort. His wings answered instincts he didn't remember learning. When he tilted left, his body committed fully. When he wanted height, the air simply offered it. And then his eyes caught something that made his chest, his new chest, light and hollow, tighten anyway. His own photograph, a framed portrait on an easel near the gravesite, the same smile he'd used for every family event because it kept questions away. Clean shirt, straight posture, eyes that looked like they had plans. He had never planned for this. From the sky, he watched the mourners shift in place, shoes sinking slightly into grass, hands squeezing paper programs until they wrinkled. A few heads lifted to follow him, curious, not afraid. An eagle at a funeral felt like a sign, even to people who didn't believe in signs. He was pulled lower, not by hunger, but by recognition. He recognized the angle of his mother's shoulders before he recognized her face. She stood near the front, too close to the coffin, as if proximity could bargain with reality. Her hair was tucked behind her ear the way she did when she was trying not to cry, because crying felt like permission for the world to end. Next to her stood his younger brother, jaw tight, eyes fixed ahead, not broken, angry, the kind of anger that pretends it's strength, the kind that shows up when someone was robbed of a final conversation. And then he saw her, Lena. She wasn't standing with his family. She was several steps back, half hidden by a maple tree near the edge of the gathering, like she didn't believe she'd earned a place among the mourners. Her hands were clasped together so tightly, her knuckles looked pale. She didn't wipe her face. She didn't move. Her grief was contained in her stillness, and it hit him harder than any sob, because he knew what he hadn't done. He had died without saying goodbye. And if there was one person who needed that goodbye, it was her. He drifted lower until he could hear fragments of words. The officiant's voice floated up, steady and careful, the kind of voice trained to handle other people's worst days without taking them home. A devoted son, a loyal friend, taken too soon, taken too soon. He almost laughed, if eagles could laugh, because the phrase sounded clean and meaningless against the reality of his own unfinished life. He hadn't been taken. He'd been interrupted. He'd been mid-sentence. Someone stepped up to speak, a family friend. The voice trembled, trying to be dignified. "He always showed up," the man said. "If you called him, he came. If you needed something, he didn't make you explain. He just did it." From above, the eagle watched heads nod. People liked that version of him. It was flattering. It was also incomplete, because there were calls he hadn't returned. There were nights he'd let ring out because he didn't want to deal with the heaviness of someone else's feelings when his own were already crowded in his chest. There were messages from Lena he'd read and set aside. "I need to talk to you," because he kept telling himself, tomorrow, after work, after things calmed down. Tomorrow had never arrived. As the next speaker began, his gaze locked on a small detail that made everything inside him tense again. A man standing slightly behind his brother. At first, it looked like nothing, just another attendee. Grey coat, hands in pockets, face neutral. But the eagle recognized him with a clarity so sharp, it felt like pain. Cal Mercer, his business partner, the man who had been the last person to see him alive. Cal's presence didn't make sense. Not here, not with the family, not with Lena. Cal and he hadn't been friends outside the office. Their relationship lived in contracts, deadlines, and carefully balanced politeness. And yet Cal stood there like he belonged, eyes moving across the crowd, not grieving, not remembering, calculating. The eagle's vision sharpened involuntarily, pulling details forward the way a lens snaps into focus. Cal's shoes were spotless, no damp grass stains. He'd arrived late, probably after the service began, when people would be too busy to question him. Cal glanced once at the coffin, then looked away quickly, as if the sight annoyed him rather than saddened him. The eagle's heart beat faster. He had died suddenly. Everyone said it was an accident, a late-night drive, bad weather, a guardrail, done, finished, tragic. But from the sky, watching Cal's face, something didn't sit right. Cal's expression wasn't grief. It was relief. The eagle swept lower, just enough to hear Lena's quiet voice as she spoke to no one in particular, maybe to the ground, maybe to the air. "I should have answered," she whispered. The words punched through him. He wanted to tell her no. He wanted to tell her she wasn't responsible. He wanted to land beside her, to prove he was still here, to force the world to pause long enough for one honest exchange. But his body didn't move like a human body anymore. It didn't obey longing, it obeyed instinct, gravity, and the invisible rules of being a creature built to observe, not confess. A gust of wind pushed him upward again, and he saw the entire scene at once. The family clustered tight, Lena on the edge, Cal hovering in the wrong place. Then Cal did something small that made the eagle's blood feel like ice. Cal pulled out his phone. He didn't take a photo of the coffin. He didn't record the speech. He angled it toward Lena, like he was documenting where she was standing, like she mattered to his plan. The eagle circled once more, higher this time, forcing his mind, his human mind trapped in an eagle's body, to accept what was forming in the air between facts. His death had ended something, but it had started something else, because if Cal was here, watching Lena, measuring reactions, then maybe the accident wasn't just an accident. Maybe the goodbye he never got to say was being replaced by something darker. And maybe the reason he had been allowed to return, feathers and bone and wind, was not for comfort. It was for witnessing, for seeing what he'd missed while he was alive, for staying close long enough to understand what really happened to him and what might happen next. Cal Mercer didn't stay for the final prayer. He waited until the last speaker stepped away and the crowd shifted, until grief created just enough distraction to make movement invisible. Then he slid backward through the line of parked cars, like a man leaving a meeting early, not a funeral. The eagle watched him go. Not with curiosity, with recognition, because Cal's body language hadn't changed, not even here, not a slump, not a tremor, not the tiny human tells that grief forces out of you when you're standing near a casket. Cal moved the way he moved in the office, deliberate, efficient, as if every step had already been approved. The eagle dropped lower, wings cutting the air in a controlled dive. He landed on the highest branch of a pine near the cemetery entrance and watched Cal unlock his sedan. Cal didn't look up once. He didn't scan the sky. He didn't check over his shoulder. People who feel guilt check for witnesses even when none exist. Cal didn't. He started the car, waited for a gap, and pulled onto the road. The eagle launched after him. Flying over streets felt effortless now. Wind became a conveyor belt. Traffic became a slow, predictable river of metal and glass. He stayed high enough to avoid attention, low enough to keep Cal's car in frame. Cal drove toward town, not home. He passed the familiar grid of shops and stoplights and kept going until the streets thinned into industrial lots and storage buildings, the kind of places where no one asks why you're there, because nobody wants to admit they know those places exist. He turned into a fenced property with a small sign that read, Mercer and Rowe, Private Office. The eagle's chest tightened. Mercer and Rowe was the business, their business, Cal's and his. Except now, the their part was gone. Cal parked near the back entrance, unlocked the door, and disappeared inside. The eagle circled the building once and found an old service ladder bolted to the side. He landed on the roof edge, claws scraping lightly. A ventilation unit hummed. Rainwater sat in shallow puddles. From up here, the town looked calm and ignorant. He moved toward a narrow skylight that was half opaque with dust. He couldn't see much, but he could hear. A drawer opening, paper shifting, a printer spitting out a sheet. Then Cal's voice, low, speaking to someone on the phone. "No, it's already handled," Cal said. "His family's still in shock. Lena's unpredictable, but she doesn't have proof of anything. She never does." The eagle froze. Lena. Cal said her name like it was a problem on a spreadsheet. Cal continued, voice steady. "The keys are in my possession. The files will be cleaned out tonight. Anything that can be misinterpreted gets shredded. I want the servers wiped before anyone starts feeling brave." A pause. Cal sighed like he was tired of explaining something obvious. "Because grief makes people nosy, and nosy people make mistakes. We're not letting that happen." The eagle's mind raced faster than the wind around him. Files, keys, servers. This wasn't a man mourning a partner. This was a man securing territory. Cal ended the call and moved again. More drawers, more papers, then the unmistakable sound of a lockbox clicking open. The eagle shifted his weight and peered through the skylight harder, forcing his eyes to adjust. His vision sharpened until the dim office layout resolved. Desks, cabinets, a conference table. Cal stood near a safe set into the wall, pulling out folders and stacking them on the table, like he was building a small tower of liability. Then Cal did something that made the eagle's stomach twist. He pulled out a framed photograph. Not a corporate headshot. Not a team photo. A candid picture, him and Lena at a street fair, laughing in the kind of unguarded way people only laugh when they think their life is stable. Cal stared at it for a long moment, then slid it into a folder as if it was evidence, not memory, evidence. The eagle felt a surge of helplessness so sharp it nearly knocked him off the roof. He had been alive for years and had never seen Cal like this. Because when you're alive, you interpret people through your own assumptions. You give them the benefit of routine. You let their calmness register as reliability. From above, as a creature made to observe patterns, he saw the truth. Cal wasn't cleaning up grief. He was cleaning up narrative. The eagle shifted along the roofline to another skylight above a hallway. Below, Cal carried the stack of folders into a side room, the storage room with the old filing cabinets. Cal opened one cabinet, then another, pulling out more papers. Then he stopped. He held one folder in his hand longer than the rest. The eagle couldn't read the label from this angle, but he saw Cal's face change for the first time. Not grief, irritation. Cal opened the folder and scanned the contents quickly. His jaw tightened. He flipped pages faster, like he was looking for something that should be there, but wasn't. Cal muttered under his breath, sharp enough for the eagle to catch a few words. "Where is it?" Cal grabbed his phone again and called someone, different tone now, colder. "Did you take anything out of the office last week?" he asked. "No, don't give me that. I need a straight answer. The item we discussed. The one that could complicate everything." Silence on the line. Cal's voice dropped. "Listen carefully. If that shows up in the wrong hands, this doesn't become a business issue. It becomes a criminal issue. Do you understand me?" The eagle's heart hammered. Criminal. Cal said it like a border that couldn't be crossed, which meant something already had. Cal ended the call abruptly and stood still in the storage room, thinking. Then he did what calm people do when panic starts creeping in. They convert it into action. He locked the cabinet, checked the safe, relocked it. Then he grabbed a set of keys and walked out of the office with purpose. The eagle took off immediately, sweeping down to follow from above. Cal drove fast now, ignoring the softness of the afternoon. He cut through side streets and headed toward a part of town the eagle recognized instantly. The row of older apartments where Lena lived. The eagle's wings beat harder without him thinking about it. Cal wasn't going to visit her like a friend. He wasn't going to offer condolences. He was going to check what she knew, or what she had. Cal parked down the block, not directly in front of her building. He stepped out, scanned the street, then walked with his hands in his coat pockets like he belonged anywhere he chose to be. The eagle landed on a street lamp across from Lena's building. From this height, he could see into her second-floor window. Lena was inside. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at something in front of her. An envelope. Her eyes looked raw, but focused, not lost in grief, sharpened by it. She opened the envelope slowly and pulled out a small object, a flash drive. Lena held it like it weighed more than it should. She whispered to herself, barely moving her lips. The eagle couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need them to understand the emotion. This wasn't a keepsake, it was a choice. Outside, Cal reached the building entrance and pressed the buzzer for her apartment. Once, twice, then again, longer. Lena didn't move. Cal pressed again, more impatient. Lena finally stood, walked toward the door and paused. She didn't open it. She leaned close enough to speak through it. "What do you want, Cal?" she said, voice flat. Cal's voice softened instantly, the voice of a man performing sincerity. "Lena, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. I know today was hard." The eagle's feathers lifted slightly. It wasn't anger, it was instinct. Predators adjust tone the way humans adjust clothing. Lena didn't bite. "I'm fine," Cal kept going. "I've been trying to reach you. We should talk. There are things, logistics, his stuff, the office. I said I'm fine," Lena repeated, sharper now. Cal paused, then tried again, voice dropping into concern. "Did he leave anything with you? Any documents? Anything that would help us settle what he was working on?" There it was, not condolence, inventory. Lena stayed silent for a beat too long. The eagle saw it immediately, the microsecond where Lena's face tightened, where she decided something. And Cal heard it too, because men like Cal listen for hesitation more than they listen for words. Lena finally spoke. "No." Cal's voice stayed gentle, but the edge slipped through. "Are you sure?" Lena's hand inside her apartment tightened around the flash drive behind her back. She didn't answer. Cal leaned closer to the door, voice low now. "Lena, don't make this complicated." The eagle felt something inside him break open. He hadn't said goodbye to Lena. And now, the first act of his afterlife was watching someone threaten her in his name. He couldn't shout, he couldn't grab Cal's arm, he couldn't stand between them. But he could watch. He could remember. And he could do the only thing an eagle could do in a world full of locked doors and hidden motives. He could become a sign Lena couldn't ignore. Because whatever was on that flash drive was the reason Cal looked relieved at a funeral. And if Cal was here, pressing her door like it belonged to him, then the truth about his death was closer than anyone realized. Lena didn't open the door. She kept her forehead close to the wood, close enough to feel the vibration of Cal's breathing on the other side, and she spoke like she was reading from a script she didn't fully trust. "I told you no." Cal stayed quiet for one beat, just long enough to switch tactics. "Okay," he said softly, "then at least let me leave something for you. A letter, some paperwork. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone." Lena's eyes flicked to the flash drive in her hand. Her palm was damp. She had already decided not to hand it over. What she hadn't decided was what to do next. Cal lowered his voice again. "I'm not your enemy, Lena. I'm the only person who can help you not drown in this." The eagle clung to the street lamp, watching Cal's posture. His shoulders were relaxed, his head slightly bowed, an angle designed to look sympathetic. But his feet didn't move. He didn't step back. He didn't give her space. He held position like a man waiting for a door to crack. Lena exhaled sharply through her nose. "Go home, Cal." Cal's tone hardened, barely, a temperature change, not a storm. "Just tell me one thing. Did he leave anything with you? Anything he was worried about?" Lena didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence was a lantern in the dark. Cal's eyes narrowed, then widened again as he reset his face. He looked down the hallway cameras, if there were any. He forced a smile you could hear through a door. "Okay," he said, "I'll leave you alone. For now." The eagle's feathers lifted as Cal finally stepped back. He walked down the stairs slowly, like he wasn't leaving because he was dismissed, like he was leaving because he'd chosen to. Outside, he paused at the curb and pulled out his phone. He didn't call, he typed. His thumb moved fast, precise. Then he looked up, not at Lena's window, at the sky. The eagle froze. Cal's eyes didn't lock onto him exactly, but they held on the general space above the building, lingering for a moment too long, like he was searching for a feeling he couldn't name. Then Cal turned and walked to his car. He drove away without slamming the door, without speed, without anger. That was worse. Lena waited until his car disappeared, then locked the deadbolt again, even though it was already locked. Her hands shook with the delayed adrenaline that arrives after a threat leaves the room. She returned to the kitchen table and set the flash drive down like it could bite her. The eagle launched off the street lamp and glided to the branch of a tree near her window. From here, he could see through the thin curtains. He couldn't hear every word inside, but he could read rhythm, movement, hesitation. Lena opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then retreated, then returned. She didn't look like someone curious. She looked like someone about to step off a ledge. Finally, she plugged in the flash drive. The screen lit up with a folder labeled Tower, Audio, Logs. Beneath it were dates. Some were recent, some were not. Lena clicked the first file. An audio player opened. Static, then a voice. Low, clipped, unmistakably his. Not a recorded voicemail, not a casual recording. It sounded like a man talking to himself because he didn't trust the room. "If you're hearing this," his voice said, "I didn't get to choose my timing. And if Cal Mercer is anywhere near my funeral, it's because he thinks he owns the ending." Lena's hand flew to her mouth. She didn't cry. She just stared, stunned, like grief had been waiting for evidence. The eagle felt something inside him twist. Hearing his own voice, human, familiar, made the distance between who he had been and what he was now feel unbearable. On the recording, his voice continued. "I've been guarding something at the office. Not because I'm paranoid. Because I know how Cal works. He doesn't steal with his hands. He steals with paperwork, with leverage, with silence." Lena leaned closer, eyes wide. "I found out 3 weeks ago that Cal has been running side agreements, private payouts, insurance arrangements, and there's one thing that makes it worse. He's been using my signature." Lena's chair scraped back slightly. The recording crackled. His voice lowered. "And if you're wondering why I didn't confront him, I tried." He laughed. "He told me no one would believe me without proof. Then he said something that's been ringing in my skull ever since." A pause. A breath. He said, "People don't care what happened. They care what they can prove." Lena whispered, "Oh my God." The eagle watched her eyes move, as if she could see Cal standing right there in her kitchen. On the recording, his voice hardened. Rare for him. He had always avoided conflict, always tried to smooth edges. But this was raw. "I saved everything. Copies, audio, a timeline. I hid it where Cal wouldn't look, because he thinks like a man who only searches places he controls. This drive is not for revenge. It's for protection." Lena's breathing became shallow. "Because if I disappear," his voice said, "it won't be an accident, and if it becomes an accident, that means Cal got to tell the story." The eagle's claws dug into the bark. Lena paused the audio and stared at the kitchen wall like it was moving. Then she did something that the eagle felt in his bones. She didn't call Cal. She didn't call his mother. She didn't call a friend. She called the one person Cal hadn't mentioned. A local investigative reporter who had covered business corruption cases for years. A woman Lena had met once at a fundraiser and never forgotten because she had asked uncomfortable questions politely. Lena left a voicemail. "My name is Lena Harrow," she said, voice strained but controlled. "I have something you need to hear. It involves Mercer and Rowe and the man who just died." She hung up and immediately regretted it. Regret is the body trying to pull you back from the edge. Then she heard something outside. Movement in the hallway again. Lena froze. She moved quietly to the peephole. Nobody. But the doorknob looked slightly different, not turned, not loose, just touched. She backed away, heart hammering, and grabbed her phone again. This time she didn't call the reporter. She called the police non-emergency line and asked for a wellness check, worded carefully, like she didn't want to sound dramatic. While she waited, her eyes drifted to the window. The eagle sat on the branch, perfectly still, watching her. Lena's breath caught. She stepped closer to the glass, as if drawn. The eagle tilted his head, and Lena whispered something that cracked her voice open. "Is that you?" The eagle couldn't answer with words, but he shifted forward just slightly and pressed his beak gently against the window pane. Tap. Once. A small sound. A sign. Lena's eyes filled, not with tears but with recognition so sharp it looked like fear. Because if he was here, if something of him remained, then the warning on that flash drive wasn't a theory, it was a countdown. And Cal Mercer hadn't come to offer condolences, he had come to see how much time he had left. The police arrived quietly, no sirens, no lights. Just a knock that carried authority without urgency. Lena opened the door with the chain still on, her eyes scanning the hallway before she unlatched it fully. 2 officers stood there, polite, cautious, already reading the room the way experience teaches you to do. They asked routine questions. She answered carefully. She did not mention Cal by name yet. She did not mention the flash drive. She said only that she felt unsafe, that someone connected to her late partner had come by unannounced, that she needed the presence more than the action. The officers noted it. They advised her to call immediately if the man returned. They left, and the silence that followed felt louder than before. Lena locked the door again and leaned against it, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor. Her breathing finally broke into shallow, uneven pulls. Not panic, focus. The kind of focus that comes when your life shifts from passive to alert. Outside, the eagle remained. He had learned something new about time. As an eagle, minutes passed differently. Waiting was natural. Watching was purpose. He did not feel impatience the way humans did. He felt alignment, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be, at exactly the moment he was needed. Inside, Lena wiped her face and stood. She didn't pace. She didn't spiral. She opened her laptop again and resumed listening. The recordings unfolded like a map. Voice memos, phone calls, calendar entries. One file labeled, "Merger Do Not Discuss in Office." Another labeled, "Insurance Structure, Discretion Required." And beneath it all, timestamps that didn't align with the official narrative Cal had always presented. What struck Lena most wasn't the content, it was the tone. His voice in the recordings wasn't frightened, it wasn't dramatic, it was deliberate. Like someone who had accepted that confrontation wouldn't save him, but preparation might. There was one file she almost skipped. Short, unnamed. She clicked it. "If you're hearing this," his voice said again, quieter this time. "Then I didn't get to fix it myself." Lena closed her eyes. "I want you to understand something," he continued. "Cal doesn't act out of rage. He acts out of entitlement. He believes outcomes belong to whoever controls the paperwork." A pause. "And if anything happens to me, he will move fast, not to mourn, to erase." Lena opened her eyes and looked at the door again. Outside, Cal had not returned, which meant he was doing exactly what the recording predicted. She checked her phone. A missed call. Unknown number. Her stomach tightened. She didn't return it. Instead, she checked her voicemail. The voice on the message was calm, measured, unmistakably professional. "Lena, this is Ruth Calder from the Chronicle. You left me a message. I think we should talk. Tonight, if possible." Lena exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She called Ruth back immediately. They spoke briefly, carefully. No names yet, no accusations. just enough to establish that Lena had materials that suggested corporate misconduct and possible criminal exposure tied to a recent death. Ruth didn't hesitate. "I'll come to you," she said. "I don't want you traveling with anything sensitive." They agreed on a time, 90 minutes. Lena hung up and began preparing, not for a meeting but for resistance. She backed up the files to an encrypted cloud folder using a password she'd never used before. She printed nothing. She labeled nothing. She trusted redundancy more than secrecy. The eagle watched her move with a strange mix of pride and sorrow. She was doing what he couldn't. She was finishing what he had started. Across town, Cal Mercer sat in his car outside the office, staring at the building like it had betrayed him. He replayed the moment at Lena's door again and again. Her hesitation, her silence, the way she hadn't denied having anything. She'd only denied him. Cal didn't feel panic yet. He felt irritation, the kind that comes when a variable behaves unpredictably. He made another call. This time, the person answered immediately. "She's not cooperating," Cal said. "Which means she has something." The voice on the other end asked a question Cal didn't like. "Then why hasn't she gone to the police?" Cal's jaw tightened. "Because she thinks she's smarter than the system." The voice paused. "Or because she's waiting." Cal ended the call. Waiting meant witnesses. Waiting meant leverage. Waiting meant that the ending wasn't his anymore. Back at Lena's apartment, the light outside shifted as the afternoon slid toward evening. Shadows lengthened. The eagle adjusted his stance, feathers ruffling as the air cooled. A car pulled up across the street, not Cal's. Ruth Calder stepped out, scanning the building before crossing the street with purpose. She didn't rush. She didn't linger. She looked like someone who understood that attention was a currency. Lena let her in. They spoke at the kitchen table. Lena played selected audio clips. Ruth listened without interruption, her pen moving only to mark time codes. When Lena finished, Ruth closed her notebook and looked up. "This isn't just misconduct," Ruth said quietly. "This is orchestration." Lena swallowed. "He said if something happened to him, it wouldn't be an accident." Ruth nodded. "Then we proceed carefully, not loudly, carefully." They planned next steps. Legal consultation. Independent forensic verification of the files. Protection for Lena. Not dramatic, just present. Ruth stood to leave and paused at the window. "There's an eagle out there," she said. Lena looked. The eagle hadn't moved. Ruth frowned slightly. "That's unusual." Lena's voice was steady when she answered. "He's been there all day." Ruth met her eyes. "Does he bother you?" Lena shook her head. "No." Ruth nodded once, like she accepted answers that didn't need explanation. When Ruth left, Lena stood by the window. The eagle met her gaze. She didn't ask questions anymore. She said, "Stay." The eagle stayed. Because the funeral had not been the ending, it had been the first place Cal felt safe enough to move, and now that the truth was in motion, he would move again. But this time, he wouldn't be the only one watching. Cal Mercer felt the shift before he could name it. It showed up as friction, small delays where there used to be cooperation, emails that went unanswered longer than usual, calls returned with rehearsed politeness instead of familiarity. The city hadn't turned against him openly. It had simply stopped smoothing his path. That was new. Cal had built his influence on anticipation. People acted in advance of his needs because they understood them. Now, anticipation was gone. In its place was caution. He sat in his office long after sunset, the lights dimmed, watching the glow of the city through tinted glass. He replayed his last conversation with Lena in his head, dissecting every pause. The silence had been the problem. Silence meant withholding. Withholding meant leverage existed somewhere outside his control, and Cal did not tolerate unknowns. He pulled up internal logs on his computer, cross-referencing file access histories with dates. Most of what he expected to see was there. Routine use, nothing alarming, but one anomaly kept pulling his attention back, a short access window from weeks earlier, late at night, tied to a user profile that should not have been active. His former partner's credentials. Cal's jaw tightened. He had assumed those credentials were dormant by the time the accident occurred, assumed the timing had worked in his favor. Assumptions had always served him well, until now. He closed the file and leaned back, fingers steepled, thinking not like a man in danger, but like a man correcting course. Panic would come later, if at all. Right now, he needed alignment. Across town, Lena sat at her kitchen table with Ruth Calder, the investigative reporter, their laptops open between them. The room smelled faintly of coffee gone cold. They weren't speaking much. They were listening again and again to fragments of audio, isolating phrases, comparing timestamps. Ruth paused one recording mid-sentence. "He knew," Ruth said quietly. "Not everything, but enough to realize he was being boxed in." Lena nodded. She had stopped crying hours ago. Grief had hardened into clarity. "He said Cal believes outcomes belong to whoever controls the paperwork," Lena replied. "That's exactly how he moved through the world," Ruth made a note. "That belief only works when systems cooperate." Outside the window, the eagle shifted on the branch, feathers catching the streetlight. He had learned to recognize certain patterns, voices that returned repeatedly, names spoken with tension, moments where the air inside a room felt heavy, even without sound. Cal's name carried that weight. The eagle had followed him twice more since the funeral, always from a distance. Always unseen, he watched Cal move through spaces with confidence that no longer matched the environment. Doors opened slower, conversations ended quicker. Eyes lingered on Cal's face just long enough to suggest recalculation. Cal noticed those looks. He interpreted them not as suspicion, but as inefficiency. That misreading cost him. The first formal sign arrived in the form of an email from a regulatory agency requesting documentation related to a past insurance adjustment. Routine language, neutral tone, but Cal knew the subtext. Someone had asked the right question. He forwarded the email to his legal counsel with a brief note. "Handle quietly." The reply came back slower than usual. "We'll need to see the full context before advising." Cal stared at the screen. Full context was dangerous. He stood and paced the office, movements clipped. His mind began running contingency trees. Who could talk? Who needed reassurance? Who needed distance? He considered Lena again, her calm refusal to engage, the way she had stood her ground without escalation. That wasn't grief. That was preparation. Cal opened his desk drawer and removed a slim folder he'd kept separate from the others. Inside were copies of agreements that blurred ethical lines without crossing legal ones, carefully constructed gray zones. He flipped through them, searching for comfort. Instead, he found vulnerability. Across town, Ruth made her first call. Not to law enforcement, to a forensic accountant she trusted. "I need independent verification," she said. "Quietly, I'll send you fragments first." The accountant agreed. The eagle watched Lena press send, her face set with determination that felt heavier than fear. He understood now why he had been allowed to return, not to intervene physically, but to remain present long enough to witness momentum shift. Momentum was building. Cal felt it too. That night, he dreamed for the first time since the funeral. Not about the accident, about being watched, not by people, but by something above him. Silent and patient. He woke before dawn with his heart racing, dismissing the sensation as stress. He did not look out the window. If he had, he might have noticed the eagle perched on the streetlight outside his building, unmoving, eyes fixed on his floor. The next day brought escalation. Ruth published nothing, but inquiries began circulating. Discreet questions reached former associates. A request for comment landed in Cal's inbox from a smaller outlet known for methodical reporting. Cal responded with a measured statement and no emotion. but his hands shook as he typed. He reached out to a former contact in municipal oversight, probing for information under the guise of concern. The response was polite and empty. No reassurance, no warning, just distance. Cal sat back and finally allowed himself a single, honest thought. This is out of my hands. That realization did not produce guilt. It produced anger. He drafted a message to Lena and deleted it. Drafted another. Deleted that too. Any direct contact now would confirm her importance. He needed to isolate the threat, not elevate it. So he chose a different tactic. He began preparing his exit. Accounts were reviewed. Travel options considered. Narratives reshaped internally. If necessary, he would step away temporarily, citing stress, family matters, anything that framed his absence as choice rather than consequence. From above, the eagle watched Cal pack a small bag late that night, his movements precise, controlled, almost ritualistic. The man still believed he could outmaneuver outcome. The eagle understood something Cal did not. Some truths, once seen, do not retreat. They wait. And every move Cal made now left a trail, subtle but visible to anyone willing to look from the right height. The eagle spread his wings and lifted into the night air, following Cal as he drove toward the edge of town, toward decisions that would seal his story, whether he liked it or not. The funeral had ended, the watching had not. Cal's first irreversible mistake wasn't emotional, it was logistical. He believed he could outpace consequence the same way he outpaced competition, by moving faster than anyone else, by making decisions before questions fully formed. That had always been his advantage. It had also always been his camouflage. But when you're being investigated quietly, speed doesn't hide you, it outlines you. At 2:17 a.m., Cal drove to a private storage unit on the outskirts of town. One of those facilities with numbered doors, floodlights, and cameras aimed at every angle. He chose it years earlier because it wasn't connected to Mercer and Row officially. He paid in cash. He liked the idea of a place that existed outside paperwork. He didn't realize that in a world of cameras, cash doesn't mean invisible. The eagle tracked him from above, cutting through the cold night with effortless precision. On the ground, Cal's headlights swept across the gravel lot like a spotlight searching for guilt. Cal parked, stepped out, and glanced around. He didn't look afraid. He looked irritated that the world was forcing him to do this at all. He unlocked Unit 114 and rolled the door up halfway. The eagle landed on the top beam of a nearby light pole, high enough to see into the unit through the gap. Inside were boxes labeled in Cal's handwriting, old electronics, legal folders, a sealed plastic bin, and in the back, a metal case the size of a carry-on suitcase. Cal pulled the metal case forward, knelt, and opened it. The eagle's eyes sharpened. Hard drives. Several of them, neatly wrapped, numbered, and bundled with cable ties, like they were being prepared for burial. Cal removed 2 drives and placed them into his duffel bag. He hesitated over a third. His jaw flexed once. Then he took it too. He closed the case, locked the unit, and left without checking the cameras. That was the mistake, because the cameras had checked him. He drove straight to the office. Not for work, for erasure. At Mercer and Row, Cal used his keycard to enter the back entrance. He knew the building's blind spots, the angles where motion sensors were less sensitive. He moved with a familiarity that suggested ownership. But he didn't know about the new layer Ruth had urged into place. Earlier that evening, Ruth's forensic accountant, quiet, methodical, unromantic, had recommended a simple protection. A mirrored log capture for any server changes, not a hack, not a trap, just redundancy. A separate record stream that couldn't be edited from inside the system. Lena hadn't understood the technical details, but she'd understood the purpose. If Cal tried to erase, the system would remember. At the office, Cal powered on a workstation in the server room. He plugged in the drives. He ran scripts. He didn't look like a man committing a crime. He looked like a man doing maintenance. His eyes stayed calm as text scrolled across the screen, deleting archives, overwriting access histories, wiping client files that carried the wrong signatures in the wrong places, removing anything that could be interpreted in court as intent. Cal exhaled through his nose. "Fixing," he muttered to himself, as if speaking the word made it true. The eagle, miles away now, couldn't see the screen, but he didn't need to. He could feel the rhythm of a predator trying to erase its own tracks. That rhythm was universal. Back at Lena's apartment, Ruth received a notification from the accountant, a time-stamped record showing unusual remote activity inside Mercer and Rowe's system. Ruth stared at the message. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply said, "He's doing it." Lena's face drained. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means he's scared," Ruth answered. "And when people like him get scared, they stop being careful." Ruth made 2 calls immediately. First to an attorney specializing in corporate misconduct. Second to a contact at a state-level investigative unit known for white-collar cases. She didn't frame it as murder. She framed it as tampering, because tampering was provable. And once provable charges exist, deeper questions follow legally. The next morning, Cal arrived at the office looking normal. Too normal. He wore the same tailored coat, the same clean expression. He greeted staff with mild warmth, as if nothing had happened. But the building itself had changed. He could feel it. Conversations stopped when he walked by. People looked down too quickly. A receptionist who normally smiled offered only polite neutrality. A junior analyst avoided eye contact entirely, pretending to be absorbed in the printer. Cal sat at his desk and opened his email. 3 new messages appeared from clients requesting clarification about documents they'd been asked to re-sign. That shouldn't happen. Cal's stomach tightened. That meant someone had already noticed inconsistencies. He opened the first request and saw a screenshot attached, an agreement with his partner's signature dated after the supposed accident. Cal's fingertips went cold. The problem wasn't the signature. It was the date. A mistake like that wouldn't survive careful review, unless someone had forced it into the light. Cal closed the email and stared at the screen without blinking. His mind ran through every possibility and landed on the most dangerous one. Lena didn't just have evidence. She had timing. And timing turns suspicion into action. He stood abruptly and walked to the window. On a building across the street, perched on an old satellite dish, an eagle watched him. Cal's breath caught. This time, he didn't look vaguely upward. He looked directly at it. The eagle didn't move. Cal felt something crawl up his spine, not superstition, not fear exactly, something more unsettling, the sensation of being tracked by a witness you can't intimidate. He turned away sharply, annoyed at himself for reacting, but the reaction mattered, because Cal had always operated under one assumption: witnesses can be managed. The eagle was not manageable. By midday, Cal received a call from his attorney. The attorney's voice was measured, but it carried a new stiffness. "Cal," he said, "we need to talk about your recent server activity." Cal felt the room tilt. "What server activity?" he asked, tone calm, as if the question was ridiculous. "We're receiving inquiries," the attorney replied, "and there are logs we can't explain away. Someone preserved a mirror of your actions." Cal's throat tightened. "Who?" he asked. A pause. "I don't know," the attorney admitted. But I'm telling you this as your counsel. Stop touching anything. Do not contact anyone connected to your partner. And if someone reaches out, especially media, you say nothing." Cal's jaw clenched so hard it ached. He ended the call. He sat perfectly still for a long moment, then opened his desk drawer and stared at the folder he'd kept separate. For the first time, he didn't feel in control of the narrative. He felt cornered by it, and cornered men don't confess. They strike deals. They create distractions. They try to move the spotlight. Cal pulled out his phone and typed a message he had avoided for days. To Lena. Just 3 words. We need to talk. He stared at it before sending, then deleted it. Not because he grew cautious, because he decided on something worse. If Lena wouldn't hand over the story, Cal would discredit her. He would turn grief into instability. He would turn evidence into obsession. He would make her look unreliable before anyone heard her. That was his second mistake, because Ruth Calder had already started documenting every approach, every contact, every attempt to intimidate indirectly. In a system that now valued process, Cal's old tactics didn't create control, they created a trail, and above it all, the eagle remained, silent, patient, present, not as a symbol, as a witness, a living reminder that the man Cal tried to erase had not left the story. He had simply changed form. Cal didn't smear Lena with shouting or threats. He did it the way he did everything, cleanly. By lunchtime, 2 people who barely knew Lena had already heard the same story from 2 different directions. That she was not handling things well, that grief had made her unstable, that she was convinced something sinister happened because she couldn't accept an accident. The words were chosen carefully, not sharp enough to sound like an attack, just soft enough to sound like concern. Concern is the most useful disguise. Cal's first move was a call to Ruth Calder's editor. Not an angry call, not a demand. A courteous conversation with the tone of a man who respected journalism. I heard Ruth is speaking with someone close to my late partner, Cal said, voice calm, faintly saddened. I want to make sure your team is aware this person has a history of emotional volatility. I'm worried she's being exploited. He didn't mention Lena's name at first. He didn't have to. Editors know how to fill blanks. Ruth's editor listened without committing to anything. He thanked Cal for the call. He ended it quickly. Then he forwarded the details to Ruth with one line. He's trying to poison the well. Ruth read it, unimpressed. She had seen this pattern before. Not Cal specifically. Men like Cal, who understood that credibility could be harmed more easily than it could be rebuilt. She called Lena immediately. He's framing you, Ruth said. Don't panic. This is predictable. Lena's voice didn't shake when she answered. So what do? We document it, Ruth said. Every contact, every message, every rumor trail. And we let professionals do the part he can't control. That afternoon, Ruth met with the forensic accountant and an attorney in a quiet office downtown. The attorney didn't ask for feelings. He asked for structure. What can you prove? He said. Ruth didn't mention the funeral or the eagle or Lena's intuition. She laid out the provable backbone, the server tampering, the mirrored logs, the suspicious document dates, the attempt to erase rather than clarify. The attorney nodded slowly. This isn't a homicide case, he said. Not yet. But it is a tampering case, and that opens doors. He drafted an official complaint packaged as a procedural matter, minimal narrative, maximum evidence. The goal wasn't to win the full war in one move. It was to force Cal into the light under rules he couldn't rewrite. The attorney sent it to the State Investigative Unit. By evening, the unit responded. They didn't promise dramatic action. They asked for access to the mirrored logs, chain of custody confirmation, and an intake interview with Ruth and Lena. Lena sat at her table after the call, staring at her phone like it had suddenly become heavy. Getting authorities involved made everything real in a way grief never had. It meant consequences. It meant Cal would be forced to react. And reactions were what predators relied on. Outside, the eagle watched the building with a stillness that seemed carved into the air. In his new body, patience was effortless. But inside his mind, urgency pulsed. He knew Cal's next move wouldn't be legal. It would be strategic. Because when men like Cal lose control, they don't confess. They reframe. They relocate blame. They create an alternate reality that feels plausible enough to delay action. and delay was Cal's last remaining weapon. That night, Lena received a text from an unknown number. "Stop. You're making a mistake." She stared at it. Her thumb hovered, then moved. "Who is this?" No response. 5 minutes later, another text arrived. "You don't understand what you're holding." Lena felt her throat tighten. She didn't show it. She screenshotted everything and sent it to Ruth. Then she powered her phone off and sat in silence, listening to the building. A faint sound, not loud, not clear. A click that could have been nothing. Lena stood and walked to the door. She pressed her ear against it. Nothing. She checked the deadbolt, locked. The chain, set. The doorknob, still. She stepped back, and her eyes drifted to the window. The eagle had shifted from the branch to the ledge directly outside her kitchen window, closer than before. Lena whispered, "What is it?" The eagle tilted his head and looked, not at her, but at the corner of the room, the small shelf near the wall, where Lena had placed the flash drive. Lena's heartbeat spiked. She crossed the room quickly, picked up the flash drive, and turned the laptop back on. Her fingers moved with purpose now, not hesitation. She opened the file list again. This time she didn't click the first audio. She scrolled and found a folder she hadn't opened yet. "Night of accident. Do not play at home." Lena's stomach dropped. She glanced at the window. The eagle didn't move. He watched her like he was bracing her for what she was about to hear. Lena clicked. Inside were 2 recordings, one labeled cab audio and another labeled tower call. Her hand shook as she hovered over the first. Then she pressed play. The sound was faint at first. Engine noise, rain tapping the windshield. Then his voice, breathing, controlled. "I'm on my way," he said. "I have the drive. Don't try anything stupid." A second voice responded through a speaker. "Cal, you always dramatize," Cal said, almost amused. "Just bring it in. We'll settle it cleanly." His voice, calm, smooth, made Lena's skin feel cold. "Cleanly," her partner repeated, bitterness in the word. "You mean quietly?" Cal exhaled, as if he was bored. "I mean without you ruining both of us. You think the world cares about your morality? It cares about documents." A pause, then her partner's voice again, tighter now. "I backed up everything." Cal's voice shifted slightly, not angry, sharper. "You didn't." Another pause. Rain got louder, then static. Not a crash, not a scream, not the kind of dramatics people expect, just a sudden interference like something cut. Lena's hand flew to her mouth. She didn't breathe. The audio returned, distorted. Her partner's voice was lower, strained. "You're not alone." Cal's voice came through again, but farther away now. "I'm ending this," Cal said. Then the recording stopped. Lena sat frozen. She looked at Ruth's number on her phone, then remembered the phone was off. She didn't move to turn it on yet, because the eagle had shifted again, its gaze now fixed on her front door, rigid, alert. Lena stood slowly, and in that moment she understood something with terrifying clarity. Cal wasn't just trying to erase evidence. He was trying to reach it, tonight. Lena didn't run. Running would have turned fear into noise, and noise into mistakes. She moved the way Ruth had taught her in the last hour of their meeting, deliberate, documented, and 2 steps ahead of whatever story Cal wanted to write. First, she turned her phone back on, not to call the police in a panic. Panic made you sound unreliable. She called the non-emergency line again, steady voice, steady words. "This is Lena Harrow," she said. "I'm requesting an officer to stand by. I've received threatening messages, and I believe someone may attempt to enter my apartment tonight." The dispatcher asked for details. Lena provided only what mattered: the texts, the timing, the reason she felt unsafe. No theories, no metaphors, no mention of corporate wrongdoing. She didn't need the dispatcher to believe her interpretation. She needed the dispatcher to act on her vulnerability. "Stay inside," the dispatcher said. "Someone's on the way." Lena hung up and exhaled once. Then she did the second thing Ruth had insisted on. She split the evidence. She plugged the flash drive into her laptop and copied the entire folder to an encrypted cloud vault Ruth had set up earlier. Then she copied the same folder onto a second drive, one Ruth had left with her for exactly this reason. Lena slid that drive into an envelope and wrote one word on it. Ruth. She stuffed it inside a cookbook on the shelf. An absurd hiding place, but absurd was the point. Cal would search desk drawers, bags, coat pockets. He would search places that looked like evidence. He would not search a cookbook. Outside the window, the eagle remained rigid, feathers barely moving in the night air. Lena had started to read his posture like a language. When he sat relaxed, the world was calm. When he stiffened, something was approaching. Right now, he looked carved from warning. Lena dimmed her lights and moved away from the window. She didn't want to silhouette herself. She didn't want Cal, or anyone, seeing her from outside. She sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, recording paused at the last line. "I'm ending this." The words wouldn't leave her mind. Her partner had known. He had anticipated. He had prepared. And yet he still had died without saying goodbye. A sound moved through the hallway. Footsteps, slow, not rushed. The kind of footsteps that belonged to someone who believed they had time. Lena's chest tightened. She stood and moved toward the door without touching it. The eagle shifted and let out a low sound, not a dramatic screech, but a firm, clipped call. It didn't feel like a bird noise. It felt like an alarm. Lena leaned toward the peephole. A man stood in the hallway with his back turned slightly, pretending to read a notice on the wall. Hoodie, hands in pockets. He wasn't Cal. That was worse. Cal didn't do his dirtiest work himself. He delegated. He outsourced. He maintained distance between his hands and the mess. The man glanced around, as if checking for cameras, then approached Lena's door. He didn't knock. He pressed his ear against it, listening. Then he stepped back and pulled something from his pocket. A thin tool. Not a gun, not a weapon. Something smaller. Something meant for locks, not people. Lena's stomach dropped. She backed away silently and moved to the kitchen, grabbing her phone. She didn't call again. She stayed on the line with the dispatcher, whispering now. "He's at my door," she said. "He's trying to open it." The dispatcher's voice sharpened. "Do not engage. Stay away from the door. Officers are close." The lock clicked softly. Once. Twice. Lena's hand trembled. She forced her fingers steady and moved into the bathroom, shutting the door gently. She sat on the floor, back against the bathtub, holding her phone like it was the only solid thing in the world. Outside, another click. Then the chain rattled. The man cursed under his breath, frustration, not rage. He wasn't there to harm. He was there to take. Evidence. That distinction didn't make Lena feel safer. It made her feel targeted. The eagle moved from the window ledge to the fire escape railing and lifted his wings, snapping them once, sharp, loud. The sound cut through the quiet hallway like a crack of wood. The man froze. He turned, eyes lifting. For a split second, his gaze met the eagle. And the eagle did something that made Lena's scalp prickle even from inside the bathroom. He launched, not at the man's face. No gore, no attack. He swept down hard enough to startle, forcing the man to flinch backward instinctively, arms raising to protect himself. The tool slipped from the man's fingers and clattered to the floor. In that moment, the hallway changed from controlled to chaotic. The man bent quickly to retrieve the tool, too quickly, too desperate. He wasn't trained. He wasn't calm. He was paid. A door down the hall opened. A neighbor peeked out, drawn by the noise. The man straightened, forcing his shoulders into a casual posture that didn't match his breathing. "It's nothing," he said quickly. Just a bird." The neighbor's eyes narrowed. Not convinced. Not fully alarmed either, but present. Presence is inconvenient for criminals. The man scooped up the tool and retreated toward the stairs, moving faster now. He didn't run. Running creates a story. He wanted to vanish without one. As he reached the stairwell, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed, heavier, official. 2 officers appeared at the far end of the hallway, hands near their belts, posture firm. "Sir," one officer called out, "stop right there." The man froze, like his spine had been unplugged. He looked at the officers, then at the neighbor, then at Lena's door. He didn't stop because he respected the law. He stopped because the hallway had witnesses. The officers approached, questions sharp, efficient. The man fumbled for an explanation. Wrong apartment, confused, lost. The story didn't land. The tool on the floor didn't help. Lena opened her bathroom door and stepped into the living room cautiously. She didn't rush out. She didn't cry. She didn't try to perform fear. She stood just far enough back to be safe, then spoke loudly enough to be heard. "That man tried to pick my lock," she said. The neighbor nodded quickly. "I saw him," the neighbor added. The officers looked at the tool, then at the man again. Their tone shifted from questioning to decision. They cuffed him. When Lena finally opened the door, she kept the chain on at first, showing the officers her face, her steady expression, her phone with the threatening texts already pulled up. They photographed the tool. They documented the scene. They asked her if she knew the man. Lena said no. But in her mind, she saw Cal's face, calm at the funeral, relieved. This was Cal's style, never the obvious hand, always the hidden one. One officer asked, "Do you have any idea why someone would do this?" Lena paused. This was the moment where a wrong answer could undo everything. So she didn't say murder. She didn't say he killed him. She didn't say anything that sounded like a grieving woman chasing ghosts. She said the most dangerous thing in the world to a man like Cal. "I have evidence," she said calmly, "and someone wants it gone." The officer's expression tightened. "What kind of evidence?" Lena looked past them, out toward the streetlight. The eagle had returned to the branch outside her window, watching like he had never moved at all. Lena swallowed. "Enough," she said. The officers exchanged a glance. One of them nodded slightly, like he understood what enough meant. They offered her a temporary protective detail. They gave her a case number. They advised her to contact a detective directly in the morning. And when they left with the man in cuffs, the hallway fell silent again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This silence felt like a door closing on Cal's options, because Cal had made his final play. And it had failed. Lena shut her door, locked it, and leaned against it, trembling now that she was alone again. She looked at her laptop, at the folder labeled "Night of Accident," at the phrase that refused to leave her mind. "I'm ending this," she whispered into the empty room, voice breaking at last. "I didn't get to say goodbye, but I'm going to finish what you started." Outside, the eagle tilted his head as if he understood every word, because the truth wasn't just preserved now, it was protected. And the next time Cal moved, he wouldn't be moving in shadows. He'd be moving under light. By morning, the story had changed shape. It wasn't just a grieving partner claiming something felt off. It wasn't just a businessman acting strangely after a funeral. It was now a documented attempted break-in, an arrest, threatening messages preserved on a phone, and a clearly defined motive. Someone wanted something removed from Lena's home. That single fact tightened every loose thread. Ruth Calder arrived early with a travel mug of coffee and a look on her face that meant she hadn't slept. She didn't step inside immediately. She scanned the street, the corners, the parked cars, habits built from years of dealing with people who smiled while they ruined lives. Lena let her in, locked the door, then placed the flash drive on the table like it was a loaded decision. Ruth didn't touch it yet. "Before we do anything," Ruth said, "we separate emotion from action. You're allowed to feel anything you feel, but we move like professionals. Clear?" Lena nodded. Ruth pulled out a small recorder and clicked it on. "State your name, the date, and why you asked me here." Lena did exactly that. Voice steady, words simple. No theories, no dramatic flourishes, just facts. Her partner's death, Cal's presence at the funeral, Cal's visit to her apartment, the questions he asked, the threatening texts, the attempted break-in, the arrest. Then she slid the second drive, the one hidden in the cookbook, across the table. Ruth finally touched it, placed it inside a protective sleeve, and sealed it. "Now," Ruth said, "we do the thing Cal can't control. Chain of custody." They drove to meet Ruth's attorney and a state investigator in a neutral office downtown. The building felt bland, corporate, forgettable. Exactly the kind of place where consequences begin quietly. The investigator introduced himself as Agent Larkin. He didn't act dramatic. He didn't promise anything. He asked questions in a tone that suggested patience was a weapon. He reviewed the case number from the break-in attempt. He read the text screenshots. He listened to selected clips from the audio files without reacting emotionally, only noting timestamps. When Lena played the cab audio file again, Larkin paused it at the line. "I'm ending this." He looked at Lena. "Do you recognize that voice?" Lena swallowed. "Yes." "That's Cal." Larkin didn't nod dramatically. He simply wrote it down. "Do you have any reason to believe the recording is altered?" Ruth answered before Lena could. "We're submitting it for forensic verification, but the metadata matches the dates on the drive, and the mirrored server logs show activity consistent with destruction attempts after Lena contacted me." Larkin finally leaned back. "Okay," he said. "Here's what happens next. We open a formal investigation based on tampering, intimidation, and potential fraud. That gives us legal doors. If this expands into something else, it expands properly." Lena felt her shoulders drop by half an inch. Not relief. Structure. Structure was oxygen. They signed paperwork. The drive was logged. Evidence bags were sealed. Everything was documented so thoroughly it felt almost absurd. But absurd, Lena now understood, was what kept predators from rewriting the ending. When Lena and Ruth stepped back out into daylight, Lena felt as if she'd crossed a threshold. She hadn't won. She hadn't proven murder. But she had moved the truth into a place where Cal couldn't reach it with a private conversation and a calm smile. Ruth walked her to the car. "He's going to react," Ruth said. "Not violently, strategically. Expect a public narrative. Expect whispers. Expect she's unstable to get louder." Lena stared ahead. "Let him talk." Ruth studied her. "That's the right answer." On the drive home, Lena noticed the eagle again, high above traffic, riding the air like it owned the sky. For a moment, it seemed to track their car. Ruth glanced up too. "That bird again," she murmured. Lena didn't respond. She didn't need to explain. She had stopped trying to persuade people of the strange part. She had learned to focus on the provable part. Still, as they pulled onto Lena's street, the eagle descended and landed on a tall streetlight near her building, perfectly still, as if it had been waiting. Lena got out of the car slowly, eyes fixed on the bird. Ruth watched her. "You really think—" Lena didn't say yes. She said, "He didn't say goodbye." Ruth's expression softened. Not belief, exactly. More like respect for how grief sometimes organizes itself around symbols. Lena walked inside, locked the door, and stood in her quiet kitchen for a long moment. The flash drive was gone now, but the absence didn't feel empty. It felt secure. Then she remembered something she hadn't allowed herself to consider until now. The title of the folder. Night of Accident, Do Not Play at Home. Why would he write that? Why warn her specifically? Lena opened her laptop and navigated to the cloud vault. The files were there, copied safely. She clicked into a subfolder she'd ignored before, one labeled Funeral. After inside was a single audio file, short. She hesitated, then pressed play. Her partner's voice filled the room, close, tired, painfully human. "If I'm gone," he said quietly, "I need you to understand why you'll see him there, why he'll show up like he belonged." A pause. "Cal doesn't go to funerals for closure. He goes to measure risk. He goes to see who's watching. He goes to identify the one person who might cause trouble. Lena's throat tightened. And if you see something strange that day, his voice continued, if you feel like you're being watched from somewhere that doesn't make sense, don't dismiss it. Another pause, like he was choosing words carefully. Because I won't be able to protect you the way I did when I was alive. Lena's eyes drifted to the window. The eagle sat outside, motionless. Her partner's voice softened further. But I'll try to stay close. The recording ended. Lena didn't move, because in that moment, the entire story snapped into focus. Not just Cal, not just the evidence, not just the attempted break-in. The reason the eagle had attended the funeral wasn't to mourn himself. It was to watch Lena, to warn her, to keep his last promise, spoken not with words, but with presence. And now, with the investigation formally opened, Lena understood what came next. Cal's world would tighten, and when it did, he would either flee or he would make one final desperate attempt to control the ending. Cal Mercer did not flee. Men like Cal rarely do. Running looks like guilt, and guilt breaks the illusion they spend their lives constructing. Instead, Cal chose exposure, carefully framed, strategically softened. He retained a public relations firm within 48 hours of learning about the formal investigation. A statement followed, measured, sorrowful, legally cautious. It spoke of tragic loss, misunderstandings, and false narratives born from grief. It never mentioned Lena by name. That omission was deliberate. Naming her would elevate her. Leaving her unnamed reduced her to implication. Cal appeared once on a local business podcast, not to defend himself, but to discuss the emotional toll of leadership under scrutiny. His voice was calm, his eyes steady. He spoke about cooperation with authorities, about transparency, about respect for the process. He did not deny the recordings. He reframed them. Conversations taken out of context, he said. Private disputes amplified by tragedy. But the system no longer responded to tone alone. Agent Larkin's team worked quietly, methodically. They didn't chase headlines, they followed transactions, server timestamps, storage facility footage, rental records. The man arrested outside Lena's apartment cooperated quickly once presented with evidence. He didn't know Cal's full story. He didn't need to. He only needed to explain who paid him, how, and why. That testimony cracked something open. The investigation widened. Cal was called in, not arrested, not accused, but questioned under formal conditions. For the first time, he sat across from people who did not need to like him, trust him, or admire him. They asked him to explain the storage unit. They asked him to explain the server access. They asked him to explain why a man had attempted to enter Lena's apartment. Cal answered each question smoothly. Too smoothly. Because smoothness breaks down under repetition. By the third session, inconsistencies emerged, not dramatic contradictions, but subtle shifts. A date moved, a reason softened, a memory adjusted, and those shifts were recorded. Meanwhile, Ruth published, not everything, just enough. An article outlining evidence tampering following the death of a senior executive. No speculation, no accusations, only facts and verified timelines. The response was immediate. Regulators stepped in. Corporate partners froze accounts. Board members distanced themselves publicly. The illusion Cal depended on, stability, began to fracture, and fracture spreads. Lena watched the coverage quietly from her apartment, the eagle still returning each morning to the same perch outside her window. She no longer felt afraid when she saw him. She felt steadied, like something had stayed long enough to make sure she wouldn't be alone when the truth arrived. Weeks later, Agent Larkin called. They met again in the same neutral office. Larkin didn't smile. "We've concluded the accident wasn't an accident," he said plainly. Lena's breath caught. Based on the recordings, forensic data, and third-party testimony, we believe Cal Mercer intentionally interfered with the vehicle that night, Larkin continued. The exact mechanism will be presented to the court. Lena didn't cry. She nodded. And there's more, Larkin added. Your partner knew. He anticipated risk. His preparations, those recordings, are the reason this didn't disappear. Lena closed her eyes. He tried to stay ahead of it, she whispered. He did, Larkin said, and because of that, you're alive, and the truth is intact. Cal was arrested 2 days later. No dramatic scene, no cameras, just a quiet escort through a side entrance. His public calm finally fractured when the charges were read. Not rage, not panic, shock. Because for the first time, control had not responded to him. The day of the hearing, Lena sat in the courtroom behind Ruth. She did not look at Cal. She did not need to. His presence no longer shaped her reality. When her partner's recordings were played aloud, the room shifted. Not emotionally, structurally. The words landed as evidence, not grief. I backed up everything, his voice echoed. I won't let you decide how this ends. Lena felt something loosen inside her chest. Not closure. Release. That evening, she returned home alone. The apartment felt different now. Not haunted, not tense, just quiet. She stood by the window and waited. The eagle arrived at dusk. He landed softly on the branch, feathers catching the last light of day. Lena opened the window for the first time since the funeral. Cool air filled the room. She didn't speak right away. She just stood there, letting the silence hold. Finally, she said, "You did it." The eagle tilted his head. "I'm okay now," she continued. "You don't have to stay." For a moment, the eagle didn't move. Then, slowly, deliberately, he spread his wings. As he lifted into the sky, Lena felt it. Not loss, not fear, but completion. The kind that doesn't arrive with words, but with understanding. She whispered the goodbye she never got to say. And this time, it wasn't unfinished. The eagle disappeared into the fading light, not because he was gone, but because his work was done. Some people leave this world without saying goodbye, not because they didn't care, but because life ended faster than language. This story isn't about reincarnation as an idea, it's about presence, about unfinished bonds that refuse to vanish quietly, about love that adapts when the shape of the body changes, but the promise remains. The man in this story did not return to interfere with fate. He returned to witness it, to protect the person who mattered most when he could no longer stand beside her. He stayed long enough to make sure the truth survived him. And when that truth no longer needed guarding, he let go. Borrowed Bodies is not about animals behaving like humans. It's about humans refusing to disappear when something vital remains unresolved. Sometimes goodbye isn't spoken. Sometimes it circles overhead until the right moment arrives. And when it does, it leaves quietly, not as loss, but as peace, but as